I can remember it like it was yesterday. Being 10 or so years old, browsing YouTube on my Toshiba Satellite A100, looking for videos of old computers. And suddenly, I stumble across this video of a gray brick-sized machine next to a Nintendo DS booting into Windows 98. I really wish I could find the exact video in question, but it has long since been removed off YouTube, it seems. What I'd spent 2 or so minutes watching, though, was a quick demonstration of a Toshiba Libretto 110 CT. I knew the moment I saw this tiny curiosity slowly chugging along trying to load Windows 98, I had to have it. But I was just a kid, so it wouldn't be until sometime in around 2017 when I finally got my hands on one, roughly 10 or so years later. At that time, I picked up a used 100 CT for an actual decent price. I repaired it, but sadly, I broke the screen bezel in the process, and this really triggered me. So I ended up actually selling it for that very reason, which looking back at it is so stupid. But you can still see my little demonstration video of that system on my channel. But the video probably sucks. So actually, just stay here. Yeah, stay here. I promise this video will be a lot better and a lot more entertaining. I also want to note that after selling that 100 CT, shortly after I ended up buying a Libretto U100, so this is also in more like late 2017. It was immaculate, beautiful looking system. I really wish I'd taken videos or something of it before selling it. And really, just selling it, I regret it so much. Those things are worth a lot these days, and I would have loved to make a proper video on one. But since then, I haven't owned any more Librettos. That was up until recently when I saw two 60 CTs for sale on Yahoo Auctions. I snagged them, but I also ended up reselling those as I have a specific purpose in mind for my purchase this time. I didn't make a video on them either because, well, there's just a ton of videos on those old first generation Librettos, the gray ones, so really I have nothing else to add on that topic. Given that I sold my 60 CT, it's obvious that my goal was not met with that system, so today I want to talk about the far lesser known Libretto that was only for sale in Japan. And as of the making of this video, there are only two videos I could find regarding this Libretto on YouTube. One nearly 2 hours long, and I highly suggest you check it out. I found the video to be awesome, very detailed, and just funny. And then there's one in Chinese. Now, I don't know about you, but 我是中国人じゃないです or something like that. So, today I want to talk about the Toshiba Libretto ff1100V. And I want to briefly compare it to the first generation of Librettos as well. This video will contain some factual information, but for the most part, I will simply be giving my opinion on this thing, showing you how to take it apart, and also demonstrating the software that I'm trying to run on it as well, to give you a bit of an idea on how it performs. The first of the Librettos were released back in 1996, and these were truly little low-spec marvels featuring 486 CPUs, 8 megabytes of RAM, maximum 20 megabytes, and a 270 or 500 megabyte hard disk drive, respectively. It wouldn't be until sometime in 1997 when the Libretto 50 CT made its worldwide debut, as in it was not just sold in Japan. This system is the one you'll see most commonly, and I won't even talk about it for that reason. Now, it wouldn't be until 1999 that Toshiba would whip up the Libretto FF series, being very short-lived, much like the Libretto SS series before it. And honestly, the Libretto SS series was more or less a reskinned 100 series that was only sold in Japan. According to the eBay listing for the Libretto FF that I got my hands on, the FF series was a 10-year Libretto anniversary limited edition line of Librettos. But I found nothing to back that total BS claim up. And furthermore, the first Libretto debuted in 1996. So I don't know about you, but the math on this seems a wee bit off. Personally, in my opinion, the Libretto FF series was Toshiba's direct response to Sony's PCG-C1 series, aka the Vaio picture book. This was Sony's solution to a UMPC laptop. However, they tried to make it more multimedia focused, where since the beginning, Toshiba focused on a bare-bones, ultra-portable business class system. Multimedia capabilities were not even in consideration until now. Sony had the bragging rights of having a UMPC laptop that was on par with the Libretto, but offered much more than a Libretto. So much so that it would actually have a webcam, of which it was the first consumer laptop to ever have a webcam, and video capture capability as well. This happened way back in 1998, so really it was actually roughly a year or less than the debut of the Libretto FF series. If you ask me, it seems just a little funny that a year later, Toshiba would abandon the rules which made the original Libretto so popular and instead strive for something awfully like its competition, even touting a Libretto FF as a mobile entertainment computer. At a first glance, the FF looks like a toy, and to be honest, it feels like one too. The plastic Toshiba went with is very flimsy and thin, and it makes all sorts of little creaks and cracks. The entire shell is also painted, and the keyboard, it's made of a smoked transparent plastic. Despite this, the FF manages to stay more or less identical in size to its older brother, the first generation Libretto. And unlike before, this big bad new Libretto has a lot more I/O, including USB, VGA, albeit proprietary, modem, smart card, mic in, and a 3.5mm aux out, PCMCI Type 2, and let's not forget that bigger, badder 7.1-inch display working at 800 by 600 now, versus the meager 640 by 480 6.1-inch display of its older brother. Despite the flimsy plastic, taking this thing apart is actually really easy, and unlike the first generation Librettos, unless you plan to take apart the screen bezel, the risk of the plastic literally exploding as you unclip the midframe from the bottom shell clips is little to none, which is very unlike the old first-gen Librettos, which are notorious for having their plastic frames literally disintegrate.
So we're here with the Toshiba Libretto. We're going to take it apart. Super easy to take apart, much more so than the earlier Librettos, such as the CT series. So basically you need two tools. You need a Phillips head, and one of the smaller ones, but not too small. You know, one of the slightly thicker tips like this. If you have one of these, it's not going to work, and you're going to strip the screws and have a really bad time. So don't use these. These, garbage. And you're going to want a spudger tool, like one of those ones you get in an iFixit kit, because you're going to be using this end as well as this end. So let's get right into it. First, we're going to flip the laptop over and we're going to remove the battery. Take that out. Come on. I promise it's easy. There we go. The camera now needs to come out, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to slide that like that. Take the camera out. And we're actually going to flip it back over, open it up, and we're now going to focus on this right here. To get that open, you're going to take the flat end of your little spudger tool, and you're going to probably get it like right where the F7 key is. Slide it under there, and it should just come up like that. Note for reassembly that there are little tabs on each side. Those correspond to this side here. You're going to want to have the tab right there and slide it under there, but not important right now. Our keyboard is here, so we're going to lift up on it very gently. We're going to use our spudger tool to kind of break these loose and pull our keyboard out. Set that aside. Next up, we're going to take the flat end of our spudger and just kind of gently push up on this. This is your screen and other things, so we want this to be loose. Now we're going to close the lid of the laptop and flip it over for further disassembly. So we're going to take our Phillips head and just start unscrewing all the screws, with the exception of the memory screw for the memory door, which, by the way, that module is extremely hard to find, but if you do find one, perhaps a worthwhile upgrade. These are all the same screws, so you don't have to worry about mixing and matching these up and putting the wrong screw in the wrong hole and destroying the plastic of the laptop, which you can so commonly do with these late 2000 Toshiba laptops. This is not going to be a problem for this particular unit. Use your spudger tool to just gently lift up on the RAM lid, and you can take this out as well. Okay, we're going to flip the laptop over now and very gently open it. In fact, it might half come apart at this point, which is relatively normal. Now comes the fun part. You can see that this side kind of let go, but this side over here did not. So I'm going to tell you how to get into this very easily. You can see that there's a little plastic tab right here. And basically what you want to do is you want to insert your spudger tool sort of in between it, slide it under, and I'm doing it at a really bad angle, but you basically slide it under and push like this, like that, underneath there. Just like that, gets it open. At this point, your unit should be almost fully apart, but there might be an extra clip holding it in. On this side, you can basically more or less gently push up on it, and it should give way just like that. Removing the motherboard, super easy. Grab usually kind of where the HDD is, works best. You might need to pull back on that a little bit, but it's more so a case of being very careful and gently pulling up. Sometimes you get a little reckless like me though. You say fuck it and pull up. There you go. Main board is out. You can set this aside.
To remove the hard drive, you're going to have to remove this tiny little screw here right by the bottom of the HDD. This is the little mini logic board thing that handles the keyboard and the display with the buttons and the mouse and everything. Remove that screw and gently push up on the board from kind of, I guess really any angle, just be very careful. And then from there, on the opposite bottom side of the motherboard, you're going to notice two black screws right under the HDD. You're going to want to unscrew those, and then you can safely pull the HDD out. Oh, before I forget, I should mention that there's a port on the side called remote. This is used for an accessory that will let you use Libretto as an MP3 player, but as we'll soon find out, I have no idea how anyone could ever do that with this thing. Using the Libretto FF is not comfortable. First off, you have the garbage keyboard from the previous generation Librettos, but this time we now have tiny mouse buttons as well. The clicking feeling of these buttons sucks as well, and they're so close together, so trying to do even slight precise scrolling or highlighting on this thing is just miserable. The hinges on this thing are actually surprisingly firm, and unlike someone else here, there doesn't seem to be a known problem with the hinges on these units either, so if you're looking for one of these, that's not really something you'd probably have to worry about. As you can probably tell by now, my unit has a red line on the screen. This is very common with Libretto FFs, and it's actually also common that it's on the leftmost side as well too. There's no way to fix it. I suspect this issue lies within the cable, actually where it's tucked in right around the hinge. I think what happens is, over the years with the constant opening and closing, this pinches the wire a bit and causes some issues. I personally find the FF series to be slow. Maybe it's the whopping 1.5 gigabyte factory install of Windows 98 SE that's just loaded with aesthetic Japanese bloatware that's slowing it down, but I'm really not too impressed with the speed so far. I thought that 266 MHz Pentium would be a huge difference over the 100 MHz non-MMX Pentium in my 60CT, but it really wasn't a huge step up at all. I mean, still, there is a performance difference. I mean, if you've ever tried to run Windows 98 on a 50 CT or even a 60 CT, you'll know that it's actual suffering. I should mention that the camera on this thing is actually working. There's a cable you could have gotten that would have plugged into the Libretto itself and the camera, and there's a little button on the side of the camera, and you could have actually used it as like a camera, but it's kind of useless. I mean, neat, but sort of useless. So yeah, back to performance, and here's kind of the reason why I'm so critical and harsh of it, and also why I wanted this particular Libretto as well. I had high hopes for it because I'm trying to run an older version of a lesser known RPG Maker game called UMPC. Now my Libretto 6T was not up to the task with its meager 32 megabytes of RAM and 100 MHz CPU. I had high hopes for this system, but instead all I got was kind of playable performance and a Banshee coming to life inside my system? Wait, what? Oh yeah, that's right. There's a fan in this thing. And instead of exhausting air, it actually sucks it in. The system gets quite hot, and sometimes even just navigating windows causes the fan to go bonkers. This really bothered me. And it seems to be the norm with these laptops. They get hot, and there's nothing you can do about it. Especially if you're like me and currently are stuck having to plug the system in all the time when using it due to a flat battery. To be honest, the whole fan screaming thing really ruined this laptop for me. I wanted to like it, and I do, but I can't really see myself using it for long periods of time due to that miserable fan noise. It's not even that it gets too hot, it's just the goddamn fan. So this is why I have no idea how you could use this as an MP3 player, as the fan would likely start screaming in your bag, and your poor little Libretto would be begging for some cold air to inhale. But alas, There is none to be had in a tightly packed bag soaking up the sun on a warm summer afternoon as you're waiting for the next Tokyo to your city. Well, I won't bother going over the software installing this thing because it doesn't really matter and it isn't too special. Mind you, the camera capture and video editing software is novel, but you really wouldn't want to be doing that sort of thing on this machine. So, as you can probably tell by now, this thing is pretty beat. The seller blatantly lied about the overall condition, and even while getting a partial refund, I'm quite disappointed. Performance isn't up to par with what I expected, and the cosmetic condition and flaws, it really sucks. I got ripped off. Don't buy these things on eBay, unless it's for me. I'm honest about selling my stuff. But anyways, there's no financially viable way to repair the flaws and all that stuff like the red line or the cracked lid lips, but I will try to fix the keyboard and the battery, and if I'm successful I'll make videos on it. Well, before I conclude this video, I want to try my hand at something really stupid since I really don't care about this thing at this point. Let's overclock the CPU to 300 megahertz.
Now for the bread and butter. The website says that there is a little resistor right here, which is beyond the 6th pin of this chip here, which is the, CY227A whatever. You can see there's your bigger resistors there, IC200, and this is right by the memory thing, which you can see right here. So it's this green little guy right here. We're going to go ahead and remove that. And apparently in removing this bumps up the FSB a little bit, thus bringing our memory speed up a little bit and our processor speed up to 300 megahertz because we're now running a 75 megahertz FSB. Alright, so as you can kind of see, I got the resistor removed. Did have a little bit of a mishap with the legs of this IC, but a little solder wick fixed that up, and we should be good to go now. Let's see what happens. Alright, we have the Libretto here with the resistor removed, and it should go without saying, if you're testing something like this, please remove your battery. If something catches fire, God forbid, whatever, you want to be able to have a single point of just, I guess, emergency. Just yank this out, unplug it, something. So without further ado, here goes nothing. Ooh. Will it boot? Okay, good. I'll come back to you once we're booted. I might have to install some software to check. Et voila! It's hard to see, but 300 megahertz. Now we really need to see how this is going to work. And I will gladly test this out. So I've been running Reminiscing for about 40 minutes now, and the temperature is honestly what it normally is. It doesn't really feel too much hotter than what it normally was when I ran this at 266 megahertz. So I find in terms of performance, the game, like right now I can tell it's running kind of slow. It does this in certain environments and when it loads maps, but then you'll see that once it's kind of loaded the data in, it usually runs okay. We'll see if it does it here. In most cases, it runs the game relatively well. I would say a little bit better than before, but not like a huge improvement. So, in conclusion, this video probably ended up a little bit weird and all over the place. It is admittedly the first time in probably about a year since I've made a video, but I really wanted to get this out because this is something that really excited me and I was very interested in. I'm sure there's things I forgot to mention, so if you have any questions, leave some comments and I will do my best to answer them. But overall, I have to say that while this is a really cool looking laptop, it really veers away from Toshiba's original sort of goal with the Libretto, which was a affordable, tiny little work PC that you could take with you, and it wasn't really meant to be any sort of a replacement computer. It was more so meant to be a computer that you used while you were away from your main computer, and then you would sync it up with that. So to have Toshiba come in here and give us this weird multimedia PC that has all these things, and it just feels weird. But either way, the system itself, not the greatest. It gets very hot, it's not that fast, and even with our successful little overclock hardware mod, the performance, not great. Fortunately, the heat
situation didn't really change too much. And speaking of heat, the fan is just annoying. And this is a bit of a known thing with these laptops as well. So really, I messed around with mine because mine is really beat up and it's in no way, it'll never be collector tier ever. It's just a little system, but I don't know if I would particularly go after these. If you're looking for MS-DOS gaming and stuff like that, stick to the 50 CT and the 60 CT, 70 CT, or even the 100 series. Those are better. They're much easier to find. And while they do have their own sets of problems, really, they're just overall better. They're less of a hassle. They don't have fans, so they're not like crazy loud like this. The performance difference is not really that big between the two at the end of the day. And so I would recommend sticking with the first generation or the 50/100 series. But either way, you may have seen the Libretto L1 in the video with the floppy hinges. Yes, I will be making a video on that, and I'm excited to, but I wanted to get this one out first. So stay tuned for the video on the Libretto L2.